Hey there, so today we're going to do a quick video about digging up and storing Dahlia tubers for the wintertime. Um, First things first, we've got to take down the stalks and the trellising so we can access those tubers that are under the ground. As you can see, the plants have already taken a little bit of frost, but that's okay. Soil's great insulated. The tubers are going to be just fine under the ground. It's mid-November right now here in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. I'm in a zone 7A, so we can't leave dahlias in over winter. We have to pull them out and store them and then replant in the spring. So that's what I'm doing right now. Here we go, let's get at it. Okay, so the trellis is out and the plants are cut. Next step is to get the garden fork and tease out the roots with the tubers. I'm not going to keep all of them, I'm just going to keep enough for storing, so whatever I don't use I'm just going to compost. I'm going to get my handy dandy fork with no handle. One of the downsides of having multiple plots is sometimes you leave your tools here or there and they're not always where you need them at the time, so I have some doubles of older tools here that aren't as good quality, but it's always good to have a backup. Alright, so I think I've got everything I need here. I'm not going to pull them all out. It's a lot of work and I only need so many anyway. They're just going to decompose and improve that soil for the next year. So I'm going to gather these up, take them to the table in the back, and we'll show you how I'll show you how I store them for the winter. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I've got all my Dahlia tubers that I'm going to keep for the winter dug up, sorted into two piles, one variety here, one variety there. I'm going to make sure that they stay separate throughout this process. But here's where things get, I won't use the word controversial, but every grower's got their own way of doing things from this point forward, and they all have their own preferences. I've done a lot of research myself and kind of done some trial and error over the past couple of years. And this is the way I like to do things personally, but by all means there are many ways to do this, and I'll kind of touch on a few of them as we go. But what I like to do is I'll take all my snips. Obviously we're going to separate the long tall stalks from the tubers. Now, some growers like to leave the dirt on and clean them in the spring. Some growers like to rinse them off and clean them up and then store them. Some growers like to divide them into their own little separate tubers before they store them, and some people like to just store the whole thing in one big clump and then separate them in the spring. I like to rinse them, clean them in the fall, and then store them as one big unit. And the reason I like doing this is it just makes things easier in the spring, because if you divide them now, it's harder to see where the eyes are. In the spring or over winter while they're being stored, oftentimes the eyes will start to sprout, and then you know for sure where you've got your eyes. and you can divide more efficiently and parse them out that way. So that's why I like to do it that way. 6 in one, half dozen in another. Doesn't really matter. It's just personal choice. And then, so we'll get down to that first. I'm just going to finish topping these, and I'm going to wash them up, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how I store them for the long term. Okay, so now that I've got all these washed up, I'm going to go ahead and do what I do, which is label some plain old paper bags. I don't remember the variety names. I just go by color. So I've got some pink ones and I've got some whites. But I'm just going to take these bags and I'll take 1 or 2 bunches. Now these aren't fully dried yet. They're probably maybe like 50% dry. They're a little bit damp still, and that's perfect. You don't want them soaked and you don't want them completely dried out. You want a little bit of moisture in that bag to hold them over throughout the season. So we're just going to stick them in the bag right here. I'm only going to put a couple clumps in one bag, and I'm just going to fold that shut like so to hold in that moisture with a little bit of air flow. Like I don't want them so tight that there's no room for them to breathe. So then they're going to go into a cardboard box, and by the time you stuff this up with bags, that's going to hold that moisture in and keep them firm throughout the winter so they don't shrivel up on you. Periodically throughout the winter, I will go and check in on them and see how they're doing. If they're overly dry and they're starting to shrivel, I'll just give them a little bit of a spritz with a water bottle to keep them hydrated and keep them from completely shriveling. I've always had good luck doing it this way. There are other methods. Some people like to, again, divide them before they store them, and then they'll also add a medium like sand or peat. And I think the idea behind this is the same, to retain moisture. But I find personally, because you have to dampen the soil or the peat, there's a more margin for error, because if you hold that in, if you get the soil or peat too wet, you can it's a guaranteed failure. It's also harder to check in on them. It's less. I find, if it's more work to check in on them, digging them out, checking through the peat and sand and everything, I'm going to be less inclined to do that throughout the season. It's really easy to open up a bag and check on them, and it's really easy to give them a quick spray versus digging through the peat, making a big mess, getting the peat or sand wet in an even way throughout the winter without oversaturating, and then you've got a whole new problem, and a quick little 5-minute job turns into a couple hours of unplanned work. So that's why I like to use the bag. The other method, though, the other reason why some people like to use a medium, and it makes sense, is to prevent rot from spreading. So if one begins to rot, they say one bad apple spoils the batch, right? It allows division from one tuber to the other when they're divided first in a medium, and then when you put them in the medium, you create a little bit of space in there, so it consolidates any kind of rot and prevents spread that way. When I put them in the bags, I find there's enough airflow, and as long as they're not too wet when you put them in there, that you don't ever get rot. The one, like, you're more likely going to get shriveling and drying out, and I find that that's easier to deal with than rot, and it's also less of a mess to clean up, like a shriveled, dried up tuber versus a big stinky mess. Like when you open that up, is not very fun. So that's why I like to use the bag method. I'll check in on these once or twice throughout the winter. I store them in my cold room in the basement. You want to find somewhere where it's obviously not going to freeze on you.
but not get so warm that they start sprouting early on you, because they will do that if they're too warm, and they're more likely to rot in a warm environment. So, I would say probably between 8 and 12 degrees is ideal. You might want to double check another source for that. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here. And again, there are so many ways to do this. So this is just how I do it. It works for me, and the environment in which I store them, which is in a cold room in the basement. But it could be totally different for you, and I'm just doing this for fun. Anyway, and it could be totally different. So I'm just gonna finish up. I'm losing daylight here. It's about 4:45 and already getting dark here. So the days are not long. Time is not your friend this time of year. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep on putting these in bags, like so. Like I wouldn't put more than that in one bag, just because if they do happen to rot or get some kind of mold or anything, you're not losing everything, right? So this is my way of consolidating the tubers and mitigating my risk. Again, we just roll it up like that, not too tight, and then pack them in a box like so. Okay, and that's it. We'll check in them on the spring and see how they do, and then we'll get to dividing, and we'll go through that whole process. All right, so that's it. That's how I store dahlias for the season. If you could like and subscribe on the channel, that'd be great. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.